health, culture, and politics, and a lot more, I come to you with a very, very personal appeal for BAI to help us in our very, very difficult circumstances. What I want you to do is become a BAI buddy for my program. Fill out the secure online form on our website at wbai.org to donate $10 or more each month directly from your credit card or checking account, and you will get the Members Perks card for discounts around the city posted on the WBAI website. You can donate in the name of Walden's Pond. Please do so. And that will help cut down on on-air fund drive days. Just go to our online donation site at wbai.org. I'm Shelton Walden, and I thank you for helping out WBAI Desperate Hour of Need.
Hello, this is Adam Carroll with the War on Immigrants Report, part of Global Movement's Urban Struggles on WBAI. I am working with FEMA right now on Hurricane Sandy relief, and as people notice, wearing my FEMA jacket, but not wearing my FEMA hat in this role right now. I noticed that not only is the station affected by the hurricane, but walking up the street, the brown paper and the festoon cables and the generators are still in evidence, and Starbucks is still closed and dark. The roaming around through hurricane-impacted neighborhoods throughout the city, speaking to religious and community leaders, are surrounded by gray bureaucrats and a colorful cast of right-wing FEMA reservists. I hope we're doing some good, and by the way, the deadline for applying for FEMA benefits is January 28th, and for more information, feel free to visit FEMA.gov. Speaking of communities impacted by everything, by life, this show explores stories about New York City immigrant struggles with severe social and legal pressures as we wait to see how comprehensive immigration legislation may shape up, and it does look like there's going to be some action towards the end of this month. A record number of immigrants continue to be arrested and deported each year. Meanwhile, diverse immigrant communities adapt, assimilate, and struggle for power in the neighborhoods of New York. While the struggle is largely peaceful, some individuals and communities are being scapegoated and marginalized. As we know, there was recently several killings and beatings of Muslims, and on January 8th, CARE, New York, Drum, and over 30 community groups gathered in Jackson Heights to remember the victims of racial and gender violence and demand action to change a hostile environment created by discriminatory government policies and anti-Muslim subway ads. Present at the vigil were City Council members Danny Drum and Jimmy Van Bramer, as well as friends of Sonando Sen, a New York resident murdered in December, pushed to his death by a mentally unstable woman who mistook him for a Muslim. After the MTA approved and posted ads paid for by a designated anti-Muslim hate group that associates the Quran with the tragedy of 9/11, State Senator Kevin Parker joined other leaders to urge the MTA to honor a higher standard of decency when approving subway ads. The Interfaith Center of New York has gathered a number of leaders and is planning a meeting with the MTA chairman, who is now acting chairman Fernando Ferrar. Used to be that gentleman who's running for mayor on the Republican Party ticket. There's another group as well called Talking Back, Talk Back to Hate. You can even help fund it on Indiegogo.com. So there's a number of people beginning to step up to respond to this issue. And to talk about this in a little more clarity and depth, we have State Senator Parker on the line with us. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for stepping up to the plate here on this issue and many others. I realize that you represent District 21 in the New York State Senate, which includes East Flatbush, Midwood, Ditmas Park, Kensington, and Borough Park. Very diverse, and many Muslims happen to be in that district. You've been very active on a number of issues, including immigration issues. I see on your website Senator Parker commends the governor on his immigration initiative. I see that you were sponsoring a bill, I believe, that would provide for the regulation of the licensure and practice of immigration providers. I see that you also support establishing an independent inspector general for the City of New York Police Department. Very important issues for my community, for the Muslim community. Yes. This issue, though, the MTA, with these really hateful signs which have a picture of the World Trade Center in flame, about to collapse, and there's a quote from the Quran, "Soon shall we cast terror into the hearts of the unbelievers," which is taking, obviously, something out of context and has that word terror in it, equating Islam with terror, basically. So these hateful ads, what have you... What is your take on this whole thing?
Well, part of this is that, to go back a little bit on the district I represent, since January 1, they've actually redistricted my communities a little bit, and so I no longer represent Borough Park, unfortunately, but I do represent, fortunately, Windsor Terrace and Park Slope now. Mm-hmm. But in the community that I represent still, I represent the largest Pakistani community outside of Pakistan in the world, many of which are Muslims. And many other Muslims around my district. But my district is principally an immigrant district, whether you're in fact talking about the black community, which is predominantly Caribbean immigrants, or you're talking about the Hasidic community, which are many Eastern European immigrants. And so the issues around immigration have been a big part of my decade of tenure in the state Senate. In fact, I've been in the past the chair of the New York State Senate Democratic Task Force on New Americans, which have dealt with a lot of the issues. And we've been really active on a number of things, including when Eliot Spitzer was the governor, the whole controversy around licenses for people without Social Security numbers and tax IDs. But this notion of civil rights for every single person who lives in the state of New York is, for me, one of the most critical things that I can be doing as a legislator. Mm-hmm. And when I saw these ads go up and the response from the MTA to be one where they could not stop hate from being posted up as a platform on our subway systems, I knew it was something that we had to address. And as you indicated, rightfully, this was allowed under the tenure of Joe Lhota, who is now has left the MTA and is now trying to be the Republican nominee for mayor of the city. And I'm really hoping that some of the meetings and some of the communications I've had with the acting chairman, which is Fernando Ferrer, who's a good friend, will give us some different results in terms of the response of the MTA.
Hopefully. I realize that the courts have recently ruled that MTA buses or subway space is a public forum. And so what is the implication? What do you think is the implication of the various court cases? Is this a case of freedom of the press, or are there other issues and values involved here?
Well, my analysis is that this is beyond just freedom of the press, that even though hate speech is protected, there's some things that about hate speech that aren't, particularly when it comes to government placings and things, that spaces that are common spaces. And so the group can say what it wants to say. It's my contention that although a group is able to say what it wants to say, that the government does not have to, in fact, essentially co-sign it by allowing it to go up in public spaces that is controlled by the government. Mm-hmm. And so that's the crux of the letter that I wrote, to Chairman Ferrer, essentially lays out the legal arguments on why the MTA does not have to allow it. But further, there are other options. I mean, what you saw in California was there was one city that had that had a similar ruling from a judge, and what they did is that they put up every place that they put up a billboard that had the hate speech, they bought space right next to it and put something up that essentially denounced the hate speech that was right next to it. Mm-hmm. And so that was a creative way to kind of get around it. But we certainly, I think, should not just be allowing this hate speech to go up and to continue to create, an anti-Muslim environment in the state of New York.
Mm-hmm. I see that there were disclaimers added to an earlier version, I think, but then there was the idea that disclaimers would be on even peaceful, non-hateful messages, and so it doesn't seem to me that the policy is very clear yet, and certainly not at the level that San Francisco and Massachusetts mass transit policies, which I think are what you were referring to.
Yes.
Do you believe that these may amount to public safety or public health issues, that they may represent incitements to violence? Since we've
Absolutely.
seen the
I think
murders.
that when we talk about this issue and we just talk about billboards, it sounds like isolated incidences in Massachusetts and in San Francisco. But then when you put it in the larger context of looking at, there's something like 17 states that have anti-Sharia amendments or laws that are pending, and a couple of states with constitutional amendments. We have 3 states, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and the other one escapes me. I think I want to say Nevada, that have actually passed laws that are anti-Sharia. And in Oklahoma, they were actually able to overturn it. And so when you look at that and then look in the numbers of attacks on not just Muslims, but people who are being perceived as Muslims. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a very famous case, again, going to San Francisco in March of 2011, where 2 Sikh men who were not Muslims, who were Sikhs, who were shot and killed. One of them, they were both shot. One was killed because they were perceived to be Muslims. We had and around the same time, a young girl in a public school in Staten Island who was attacked by her classmates, and as they pulled her hijab and asked her whether she was Muslim. Mm-hmm. This is just unacceptable behavior. Yeah.
And there's been 3, as you were saying, not to interrupt, but there have been 3 beatings in the last 2 months in Queens of Muslims, in front of the mosques and so forth. And in most cases, the perpetrator's not been found. But the recent killing of the man, because he was perceived to be a Muslim, has been depicted by some as a mental health issue. But again, it does happen at a time when there's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in the media, and the American Freedom Defense Initiative, which put the ads up in the MTA, but also in other mass transit systems around the country, is extremely well organized and well funded, and is part of the anti-Sharia movement as well. So this is actually a movement we're up against, and hopefully,
exactly.
Your letter and the other organizers can help create a movement, a counter movement, which I think is very much needed.
It really is, and in part, what we have to do is that, those of us of good conscience, because I'm not Muslim, right, and so it has to be a movement that is not just a Muslim movement, but a movement of people of good conscience, in the same way that the broader civil rights movement was a movement not just of African Americans, but of people of good conscience. That if we are going to make America live up to its promise, that in fact we have to all stand up, Muslim or not, Christians, Jews, stand up against this kind of speech, particularly during the week of the celebration of Dr. King's birthday. That Dr. King was for nothing else. It was actually, for, again, people being judged by the content of their character, and not the color of their skin or, the kind of religion that they practice.
Exactly.
And so we certainly, have to stand together, or we'll definitely hang separately.
Exactly, and I appreciate your work in helping pass the gun reform in Albany this week, and also I understand soon we'll be facing the hopefully the passage of the DREAM Act, which I think is in the Assembly, and hopefully will get to the Senate. I realize that state Senate is controlled by Republicans and the independent faction of Democrats, if you want to call them that. And
yes,
yeah.
I mean, we do have this kind of coalition government now, and I'm really going to be pressing upon them to bring the DREAM Act to the floor. In the Senate is actually sponsored by my colleague from the village of Harlem, Senator Bill Perkins, and he's someone who has worked on these issues of around equality and particularly around immigration a great deal, and so we all, this is at the top, one of the issues at the top of our list to get done this year, and so we're hoping that gets done by the end of the session.
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and we hope we'll stay in touch and as this moves forward, and best of luck.
Absolutely, and I want to encourage people to reach out to me if they have questions, comments, concerns. I'm Senator Parker on Facebook, and I'm also at Senator Parker on Twitter, so feel free to follow me and find me on social media.
Thank you, Senator. All right.
Thank you.
Peace.
Hello, and welcome to a Red Letter Day in the story of jazz. All this great audience, and incidentally a lot of profession around as far as I can see.
Whoops. Okay, that was an interesting sound effect. But we are going to be speaking next with Yen Ling, who is an attorney at Queens Queens Law Associates, the public defenders in Queens. And I know Yen for many years, for over 10 years. She was the staff attorney at ALDEF, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, where she was a super lawyer, took on hundreds and hundreds, I think 1,000 post 9/11 cases when Muslims were being rounded up, Muslim, South Asian, Arab, various people just being rounded up in the couple of years after 9/11. She really took on so many cases. We just had her on the line for a minute and had a snafu, so she's somewhere in hopefully not on hold. She has also won some awards, like the Bay Area chapter of the American Constitution Society last year, and also I know Islamic Circle of North America gave her a Community Service Award, proclamation from New York City's City Council, CUNY Law School, many other awards. I probably don't know where to begin or end. She's been profiled in the Village Voice. Very glad to have Yen on the line. Hello.
Hi, Adam.
Hi. Sorry about that. I think we lost you for a minute.
That's quite all right.
Welcome back to New York, by the way. I know you're from New York, and then you left for the West Coast. How was that?
It was amazing. A great 7 years away, but it's good to be back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. I hope that's okay, because I felt that you had taken so many cases after 9/11 that you might just be fleeing New York forever because we overdid it. We burned you out, but I guess not.
I was definitely burnt out, but I think, some California sunshine helped to, get the juices back, so I'm good to go.
Was that San Francisco? I didn't think they had sunshine in San Francisco. But,
San Francisco, for sure. I mean, we get fog, but we also have sun, too.
Good. Well, I know you're good at clearing through the fog, legal fog, but as far as the work you did after 9/11 and then the work you did in the next part of your career on the West Coast, I was just curious how you would compare them.
Oh, that's a great question. I walked away from New York and in essence walked away from some of the post 9/11 work. What I found was I couldn't leave it behind. And in essence, moving to San Francisco, where I think the immigrant community is slightly more different. The Muslim community obviously exists, but it's more geographically sort of, I think, further away than the dense population of New York City. I still couldn't escape it. I saw post 9/11 in the Bay Area, but I think over time it just evolved and changed, and the cases began to look different.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say post 9/11, what do you mean by that? What does that stand for?
Initially, I would say in the immediate months and years after post 9/11, it was the racial profiling of South Asian Arabs and Muslims. We saw policies that were applied specifically to a population or community of people based on their religion and based on their race. I think now that we're 10, 11 years after September 11th, I think many of these policies have been broadened to apply to just immigrants in general. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. As far as cases that you've worked on, looking at differences between West Coast and East, and maybe just evolution of the kinds of concerns that arise over the last, have been arising over the last 10 years. What changes have you seen?
Well, you and I worked pretty closely together after September 11th when I was at Aldef and you were at ICNA. And so some of the cases that you and I worked on together, really, were very stark civil rights, civil liberties cases. For example, the targeting of undocumented Muslim men, and those who were taken in the immediate aftermath and placed in secret detention. Gag orders were filed against them simply because of their religion and their race. We saw special registration, which was the fingerprinting and the photographing of thousands of Muslim men, and no evidence of national security. So I think that was
certainly
many years after. I would say now, the policies have somewhat, I think, changed, but at the same time, some of those policies have stayed and have become a permanent, I think, part of the immigration system. So take, for example, the Absconder Initiative, right, which was the initiative that started because of September 11th that targeted immigrants who had final orders of deportation. But after September 11th, it was really, really applied towards South Asian Arabs and Muslims. Nowadays, all immigrants with final orders of removal have been, since September 11th, been deported. And I think it's branched out into programs like Secure Communities, 287Gs, all these programs that are labeled as innocuous, but in essence is just a massive deportation program by the government.
I think with Muslim communities, we're maybe a bit more aware now of the use of informants and the pervasiveness of surveillance, and in fact, even how many men and women are in solitary confinement every day. I mean, at least 80,000 people in solitary confinement every day. I mean, 10 years ago, I didn't realize that our system was that punitive, and perhaps it was still evolving to this current level. So, to me, some of those abuses which were first tried out against Muslims have now been applied to a larger population. And again, you were talking about the law itself and the way immigration law and criminal law sort of have come together to mutually reinforce. I think that's what you were referring to. I was wondering if you could talk about some cases. You may, some you may not be able to mention by name. I leave that up to you. But if it would be, I think, interesting for listeners to hear about some of the cases, and also even, just how the judges are, because I think that lawyers like yourself really have an amazing vantage and witness of this time of change and trouble.
Yeah. Well, I'm now at the Public Defender's Office in Queens, and my job is focused on providing immigration assistance to the defenders in our office who represent indigent individuals who can't afford a lawyer as they go through the criminal justice system. And I think I've come back at a really interesting time, in part because we're at the height of NYPD stop and frisk. And what originally I had seen as a quality of life campaign that began with Giuliani has now expanded to essentially all 5 boroughs, and Queens is sort of no exception to that. And I'm sort of shocked, I think, as I come back to New York City 7 years later, it seems worse now than when I left, if that's even possible. And I think part of my lens is really through the criminal justice system and what I see on a day-to-day basis in Queens that makes it seem so bad. Every week I see mostly Black, Latino, immigrant men of a certain age, and not necessarily just limited to men, but also young women who are picked up for the most minor offenses, things that perhaps, Adam, you and I have done, but because we don't necessarily fit at age, we're not of a certain color, you and I would never get arrested. So, for example, I'm actually appalled at the fact that I see people who are arrested simply for putting their foot on a chair, or not the chair, but the seat next to them in a train, for walking from car to car, for throwing their Metro card on a subway platform, to riding their bike on a sidewalk. And you talk about punitive measures. I mean, the reality is I've come back to an extremely more punitive system than I'd ever seen before.
Are you saying that those have immigration consequences?
Absolutely. We now have an expansion of secure communities, which is a fingerprint program where everyone who is placed in the system are now fingerprinted by the NYPD and ordinarily are sent to the FBI for background checks. Those prints are now shared with ICE automatically. And what happens is if ICE finds a match in the system, places an immigration detainer on a certain person, no matter what the offense is, they remain in custody until they're sent into immigration detention. And the program was initially billed as this, criminal alien program, and we're going to get all violent offenders off the streets. But in essence, that's not necessarily what's happening. I have one particular person in mind who was a young woman who, in her late 20s, early 30s, from a Central American country, here undocumented, with a final order of deportation that was issued against her that she didn't know about 10 years ago because she came when she was 17. And she has 3 U.S. citizen children. She has a U.S. citizen husband. And she was selling her ice cream on Roosevelt Avenue in Jackson Heights. And she was ticketed by an officer, NYPD officer, and told that she must leave because her license had expired, her vendor license. She didn't leave. in fact, the officer came back and tried to issue a second ticket. She pleaded with the officer saying, please, officer, give me a second chance because I'm only here. I need to work. I need to pay off the first ticket that you gave me, which is essentially the fine that she will be required to pay. The officer then takes her, cuffs her, and sends her into the criminal justice system. While she's facing arraignment, an immigration hold appears. And she's been now sitting in immigration detention for the past few months, in part because of the final order of deportation that was issued against her when she was only 17, 18 years old. So it's a punitive measure, and I've seen these cases happen every week.
With the Department of Homeland Security, they have been starting up meetings with community leaders and community advocates, and I attended one about a month ago with the Civil Rights Division, and they assured us that it was only those real bad criminals who were being picked up and under prosecutorial discretion, that what you said is not happening anymore. And some of us pushed back, though I think we pushed back too softly, but I think we hadn't fully realized that that we would be meeting someone from ICE who would be so blatantly defending the current process by repeating probably Attorney General Holder's talking points or something like that. So, so you're seeing this as a pattern, in other words.
Absolutely, and I see it every week, and it's unfortunately become the norm in Queens. This may sound very sort of, I think, difficult to say, but, before I left New York City, extreme cases of racial profiling, you would hear about these cases, say, in East New York or South Bronx, but coming back now, Jackson Heights is the new South Bronx. It's the new East New York. And this is the home or the where you're going to find the largest concentration of undocumented immigrants from a variety of different countries. And I think, whatever message you received from the government at your meeting is probably just simply talking points that you've been fed, but unfortunately it's an ongoing problem.
And so this worsening of the situation would be because of ideology or bureaucracy, or what is the cause, do you think, the main cause?
I think it's a collision between harsh federal policies and meeting a stop and frisk program that under the Bloomberg administration we've been seeing more and more targeting and racial profiling of young black immigrant men and boys. And so when you have a deportation program, and it's sad because it's under the Obama administration, we've seen more people deported under this administration than, say, the Bush administration. Numbers are at least estimated for 2012, 400,000 or over 400,000. So you take that and you apply, a program like Secure Communities that sort of links, I think, what's happening on a federal level to what's happening in New York City. You wound up with, I think, these day-to-day incidents where immigrants and family members are being, I think, subject to very harsh policies. And it's akin to what you and I had seen post-September 11th with the Muslim community, where in neighborhoods in Brooklyn and New Jersey, Muslim communities were disappearing one by one. And I think it's essentially that's what's happening now in New York City and immigrant communities like Jackson Heights.
Yeah, it's a moment where the gloves come off and you see what's within the system. It's a harsh view, but what can be done and what is being done besides advocacy of individual cases, which is key, which you're doing, defending, public defender. And I'm sure public defender means, again, that you have a high caseload. I don't know how you do it. But what else can be done? What can listeners help with?
I think we're at a very critical political juncture, at least with immigration reform. We've left the whole fiscal cliff debate, and the Obama administration has promised us that the next topic of issue, aside from gun control, is immigration reform, or what you and I know of as legalization. And I think this will be an opportunity where we can change the tide on immigration issues and push the administration and push Congress to think more progressive, more comprehensive, and think about, as we sort of think about legalization for the 11 million who are here, that we not sort of compromise the possibility of providing amnesty with increased enforcement. I mean, that's essentially what has happened in the last few national debates around immigration reform, and that is the extreme right, the Republicans, the conservatives. The only way that they're going to grant amnesty or legalization to the 11 million is if we increase our enforcement of our immigration laws. But that can't be the compromise. And so I think, as citizens, as residents of New York City, we need to, I think, contact people like Senator Schumer, Gillibrand. Schumer in particular, because he's on a committee right now, on a bipartisan committee, trying to strike forth a potential bill on immigration reform, and he has not necessarily been the most progressive voice on the immigration debate.
Well, that's interesting to learn, and so I hope the listeners will take that to heart, because we can go out into the street, but the numbers matter not only in the street but in the phone calls, and there are many people who have negative views of immigrants who are willing to make those calls, and we need to at least match their numbers, and we can. So, I think that otherwise the work that Yen Ling does and the work that so many other lawyers do will just become more and more difficult. And, I don't think that's the direction we want our city to go in, or our country. So thank you for coming back to the East Coast, and I hope that things will get better so that you stay here and the sun comes out and we have spring again. So,
thank you, Adam. It's always good to be back working with you.
Yeah, likewise. All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. We'll be back in a moment. This is WBAI 99.5 War on Immigrants Report. Back to you in a moment. Hello, this is Adam Carroll again with War on Immigrants Report, back for part 2 of our show. This about the communities and neighborhoods of our city, and today we have for the second part a reporter who has been active as a grassroots reporter, reporting for the Home Reporter News in Bay Ridge and other areas of deep Brooklyn, Denise Romano. Hello, Denise.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
I understand you were a freelance reporter for the New York Daily News for about 4 years, and El Barrio News, and a number of other things, covering the Middle Eastern diaspora communities for Aslan Media. So it sounds like you've been around.
Yes. During Aslan Media, I had a column that was called Grand Central Stories, and I covered, just everyday people, that you see on the street, and it was people of Middle Eastern descent. So around the time the column started, it was when the AP broke the report that the FBI and NYPD were working together in these secret Moscow surveillance programs. So I attended a lot of rallies and protests, and I heard what they had to say, and I was happy to be able to give them a voice because a lot of mainstream media outlets were covering it. So it was a rewarding experience.
No, I appreciate that, and that a local paper like the Home Reporter News covers, basically very local stories. Sometimes they make it to, the Daily News and the New York Times, whatever, but that it really serves an important purpose. A lot of the papers are free. Some of them are not, but, both Queens and Brooklyn have a lot of local papers. Some of them are owned by the same person, but there's a lot of voices that could be heard. And the reason I wanted to have you on, because I started reading your stories after last month's interview with Jehangir Khattak of Voices of New York, of that project. And, he's promoting the diverse ethnic newspapers of New York City and how all those voices should be heard. And so your stories came up, and you're focused a bit on Bay Ridge, though I shouldn't just say you're a Bay Ridge person. Where do you live in the city? I mean, what neighborhood?
Well, I actually live in Bay Ridge.
Oh, okay.
I spent most of my life in Bath Beach. My family are still there, but when I got married last year, well, actually 2 years ago now almost, I moved to Bay Ridge. So, but the Home Reporter covers Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, Becker Heights, Bath Beach, and Sunset Park.
Well, Brooklyn's in the house then, yeah.
Yes, we have a whole, a chunk of Southwest Brooklyn. And the one paper, the Brooklyn Spectator, that's been around, it'll be at the 80th anniversary next year. And the Home Reporter has also been around since about the 50s or 60s as well. And it's family owned. The Schnepp family bought it from the Griffin family in 2011, in early 2011. And the Schnepp family also owns a whole chain of papers out in Queens, the Queens Courier, El Correo de Queens, Aspire Magazine, and we also have the Brooklyn Spectator magazine, which covers northern Brooklyn, like Greenpoint and Williamsburg, and then it's more like featuring, and that's monthly. But our papers are monthly. The Home Reporter News covers Sunset Park and Bay Ridge, and the Spectator covers Bensonhurst, and they come out weekly. I apologize. They come out every Thursday morning. So, and the Spectator is free. But all the stories are free online at homereporternews.com.
Well, great. Bay Ridge, I went to Wikipedia. I know that's cheating, but as I looked it up, it said it used to be named Yellow Hook, I guess to distinguish it from Red Hook, but also for the color of the soil observed by the Dutch settlers, and then the name was changed after yellow fever struck, and people felt that was not the best name and connotation, and then of course Bay Ridge, because you're on the bay, and it's known for originally being an Irish, Italian, and Norwegian neighborhood, and now of course a lot of Arab, Lebanese, and Palestinian Americans living there, and it's a really vibrant neighborhood. I lived there in the mid '90s, but just for about 6 months. So it's not my neighborhood, but it's a wonderful, vibrant part of the city. What kind of stories, have you seen, both reported on and heard about, that listeners may not be aware of? I mean, of course, there was the tornado, there's the Verrazano Bridge stuff, there's Fort Hamilton, Saturday Night Fever was filmed there, I guess. But, what kind of stories can you think of that people might not know about?
Well, we cover. There's still a lot of Norwegian heritage left in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So every year there's a Norwegian Day parade in May. Mm-hmm. I think it's the 17th of May, which is the Norwegian Constitution Day. And they have a Miss Norway, and we cover that. Mm-hmm. And also there's a Danish athletic club that's been around since the 50s. Mm-hmm. And they were in danger of closing, but they're okay. So we covered that. And about a few months or so ago, these women from Norway came to visit Brooklyn, and we covered that. We went around with them. They went to, we have a Nordic deli, and, we have a Scandinavian East Coast Museum, which is like a nonprofit that, preserving the Scandinavian heritage, which is run by a local woman. So, we covered that. And let's see, what else?
Well, that's touching on the kind of traditional or older population, but many neighborhoods.
But we also
go ahead.
No, we also cover the new populations as well. Like there was an Arab American festival over the summer. Mm-hmm. I wrote the story about that. Arab American auxiliary police officer, and most recently, and this is kind of like a hot issue. There's these local food vendors, mm-hmm. and they're I believe he's Palestinian, but he's born and raised in Brooklyn, and he has a food cart on 5th Avenue, 86th Street, and the problem is this is an issue that has to be dealt with, but food vendors aren't subject to the same laws and fees that brick and mortar restaurants are. So a lot of these local restaurant owners along the area got mad last spring, saying that it's not fair that this guy is selling food on the corner and he's making all this money, but he doesn't have to be subject to Department of Health inspections, and he doesn't get letter graded, and he doesn't have to pay water bills, and yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. So there was this whole, tussle. So that's kind of, the struggle that the community is going through. Even though it is a thriving community, and there's, dozens of, delicious Lebanese and, Egyptian and Arabic restaurants, mm-hmm. but, that's something that they're going through.
Yeah, reading your article about the food vendor controversy, I noted that someone had stolen or moved the bench, the street furniture that was near this food vendor in order to take away his business. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true. Someone, we don't know who it is, no one fessed up to it, actually stole a bench from the 86th Street Business Improvement District and put it in his spot so he couldn't, sell food for about a day and I think it was about a day, because he wasn't in his legal spot.
Well, the vendor is actually kind of well known because he won an award that Urban Justice Center. He won a Vendy Award. Yeah, a Vendy Award, and so hopefully that will give him some protection, and hopefully no one's going to come around and give him a ticket, and then he ends up being in immigration proceedings, like we were just talking about with the attorney Sun Lee Sun Young. In Queens, but probably Sammy is in status.
He wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
But he's born and raised in Brooklyn.
Right.
He's an American citizen, and that's people.
Yeah, and that's my bad because I'm assuming that he's. And so
it's okay.
So it's interesting because people will see some people as newcomers and therefore treated as if they have less rights. And I understand it's a complicated thing about, but I understand that vendors also have to pay a lot of fees, not just fines, but a lot of fees to the health department, and it isn't that easy for them.
Right. You're absolutely correct. And they also have to pay their, when those food vendors, it's him, and he has, 2 or 3 people working with him. So he has to pay them, and they all have families, and, so he does have his own expenses and fees, but they may or may not be as much as, brick and mortar stores.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully there isn't an element of, Muslim, anti-Muslim bigotry here because it's a halal food store that they're, food vendor that they're after. Hopefully that's not going on. There's certainly a lot of Arab community members in Bay Ridge. And how is that going in terms of assimilation, integration, getting along? Are there other tensions as well? How does that play out?
There really is no other tensions other than that. You know, the Lebanese and the Egyptian community has been here for like decades. You know, it's like they have like third generation kids going to school. And like, you know, I go to a lot of school events. Like I cover a lot of, you know, award ceremonies or, you know, Fort Hamilton. We the military bases in the area. So sometimes, you know, a lot of times soldiers visit the school and we cover things like that. So I'm around a lot of, you know, school kids on the elementary level, and it's like a rainbow. You have, you know, Asian kids and, you know, Latino and African American and, you know, white, and they're all together and they're all intermingled, and it's, you know, it's nice to see. It's refreshing that, you know, it gives you hope for the future that, you know, these kids, they're all friends, they're all together, and, you know, it's really nice. So even on the adult level, like everyone, you know, there's really nothing else like that. You know, everyone gets along, and it's everyone's involved in the community. Like the community board has a bunch of different, you know, ethnicities on it,
right?
And you know, there's a lot of people very civically engaged about, you know, keeping the community safe.
Yeah,
it's nice.
Some community boards are not as diverse, but that is a diverse community board. I noticed from your articles you wrote one about local real estate investor Musa Khalil, who owns some neglected properties that are collapsing and so forth. And so there's the negative and the positive, as all communities have, you know, positive and negative examples. There's also on the positive side, in the Arab community, Ayat Masood, who is a female hijab-wearing police officer in the 68th precinct that has been written. And so, you know, there's a lot of different stories, different kinds of people finding their way in the community, and lots of, you know, conversations about bike lanes, about hipster bars, whether we want hipsters in the neighborhood or not. You know, all kinds of interesting conversations that you can connect with either online or in the old newspaper. So I was wondering if you would just say just a little bit more about folks' views, different views probably, on law enforcement, especially after the AP articles came out.
Most people around here were, well, let's see, it was maybe kind of split half and half. That people were, a lot of people were for. Well, let me think about this.
Because we see that there's quite a few different views. I mean, whether they're from within the Muslim and Arab communities or they're from outside, you know, a lot of views and a fair amount of support of NYPD's commissioner, and yet very strong reservations too about these policies. And as State Senator Parker was talking about, many people are now calling for an inspector general. But after the AP articles, you said you were, you were just talking to people on the street about the whole issue, how secure or included people felt. And I was wondering what kind of range of responses you did get.
Oh, okay. When I spoke with the Muslim community, they basically said that they felt like they were being spied on and they didn't feel safe. You know, mind you, this was almost, 2 years ago. But, there was kind of like, a tension, but, I'm not really sure what the, other ethnicities felt about it because I really didn't speak with them. So I really can't, give a good answer on that.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Yeah. It's again, I know the Arab community there is a very old and established one, and there are Republicans and Democrats within it, and the same as the Italians are the same. I think we see that diversity becomes itself diverse, and so when you as you look forward to new articles, what other issues do you think are coming down? What can we look forward to reading about? If you can give us a little scoop here in the coming weeks.
One story I'm trying to work on. We've been so busy, which is a good thing. One story I want to work on is how a lot of displaced children from Hurricane Sandy are now going to our area's Catholic schools. There's about 80 new students in the schools. So, we're going to be covering that, how they're adjusting to Bay Ridge. Bay Ridge and the Rockaways have a nice relationship because a lot of Bay Ridge residents own, a house in Breezy Point, or they have, their cousins have a house out there. A lot of Bay Ridge residents did lose homes during the hurricane. Bay Ridge itself wasn't affected. Thank goodness. We just had, some flooding and some down power lines, but no big deal. But
how about Staten Island? Because it's just across the bridge, even though the fare is very expensive. But is there a relationship? Would you say?
There is too, because we have a lot of family in Staten Island, but they were totally. Staten Island is in really bad shape. A lot of people really, I don't think it's getting enough attention, but there's still houses that are demolished, and it looks like it did 3 months ago. So we have even we even share an assembly district. Assemblywoman Nicole Maliotakis, she represents Staten Island and parts of Bay Ridge as well. So we do have a lot of the same interests.
Well, hopefully there will be funds not just from Washington but elsewhere found for these displaced kids in the Catholic schools and the folks who still are without power. I mean, I've been out to Rockaway, and there are people still without power. So it's it's certainly an ongoing problem that we do need to keep reminding folks about. And so, well, I would before we sign off in about 2 minutes, I was wondering if you had any last things to say about just what it's like to be a reporter. As you are in a community, embedded in the community, part of the community. This is a certain model of really old-fashioned model, maybe, of journalism. And is it affected by the current the shifting in journalism, where a lot of print media is cutting back and people are struggling to stay in the career?
I think what's happening now is a lot of papers, including ourselves, we're shifting online. We have a lot of print readership, but we also we have all our stories online, including op-eds and editorials, and we also have an email blast that goes out daily, Monday through Friday. So I think that's but you can still do the same type of community reporting, and I think the most important thing about that is that you're really able to make a difference for everyday people that ride the subway and go shopping. And it's nice to be able to help my neighbors, and I know a lot of the people that my sources, not people that I meet on the street, they end up knowing my mom or my family. And it kind of has a community small town feel, which is kind of nice. And it's just rewarding to be able to make a difference on such a personal level and such a local level.
Do you ever get, Denise, write an article about me?
Yes, all the time, and it's my pleasure to write about them. It really is. I really like hearing everyone's different stories, and I really like helping them. We do this thing every week, Star of Brooklyn, where we profile if you're local community activists, and this one guy told me, he's I'm so happy. I had 30 people tell me that they saw the article, and I'm just so thank you. He was just so thrilled. So it really makes you feel good.
Well, that's the good kind of profiling, and it's good to hear about that. Well, thanks, Denise. Thank you for joining us, and good luck as you write the next stories, and perhaps we'll have you back sometime in the future.
Yes, thank you, Adam. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.
What's the website again for Home Reporter?
It's www.homereporter.com or www.homereporternews.com. Either one.
Thank you. Okay, that was Denise Romano from the Home Reporter in covering Brooklyn. And that's pretty much it for the show today. We had politicians, and we had journalists, and we had lawyers, and I would say all working hard to make New York City a better place. At the same time, don't believe the hype. Keep an open mind. Let's all stay sane and hopeful in this new year, and good luck to WBAI in its move uptown. Sydney, thank you very much, and good luck in your move uptown as well. And hopefully we'll see you all next month. Take care. Peace.